Miami hosts its inaugural sprint race. Miami hosts its I can't say that word. Miami hosts its
Inaugural.
first ever. Yeah, it's a terrible word, so I'm just going to say first ever. Oh, hoi hoi, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. I'm Shaun Rose Polidano, and joining me to travel down the road and back again is my favourite pal and confidant, Aaron Blanche Best.
Well, thank you for being a friend. How are you today?
Picture it, Stockholm 2024. I'm excitable after attending the Eurovision Song Contest, and I'm dialing into this week's episode on a location in Malmo, Sweden, to discuss a wild Miami Grand Prix. I'm very much living my Rose Island fantasy right about now.
Well, Rose was Norwegian, but back to the city of blue skies, sunshine, and white sand by the mile, Miami has actually been one of my favorite weekends of the year so far. There is so much that happened and so many good and some not so good stories to come out of it.
You know, Norwegian, Swedish, it's all the same. But, beyond a wild Grand Prix, we also had a sprint race with its own surprises and two spectacular Academy F1 races, both taken out by Alpine's Abby Pulling, supported by the Road and Works team.
I loved watching the Academy F1 drivers battle it out. There were some really amazing moments that you don't get to see because of the larger F1 cars. Like down the back straight, we had 3 cars wheel to wheel coming into one of the final corners, and it was literally anyone's game on the exit of that corner.
Yeah, it was so cool to watch, wasn't it? I also love seeing that the Academy F1 sponsors like Charlotte Tilbury and Tommy Hilfiger's support for the category isn't just for show, with both Tilbury and Hilfiger coming to cheer on the weekend and their teams in the garage by the pit wall. But now it's just us two again this week, and I'm itching to talk about the historic F1 weekend we just had. So let's kick off our review of the 2024 Miami Grand Prix.
This weekend, as you mentioned, is our second of 6 sprint weekends of the season. A sprint weekend has only one free practice session, followed by a sprint qualifying session on the Friday. Then we have the 19-lap sprint race and regular qualifying on the Saturday. Finally, the Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. Teams have a chance to score championship points in both the sprint race and the full Grand Prix. This weekend, a lot of drivers struggled with corner traction at one particular point in the track. There is a hard left at turn 16, following a chicane at turns 14-15. As this is a street circuit, there is little room for runoff areas, and the exit for turn 16 is right up against a wall. The preceding chicane resulted in the drivers struggling to get the perfect entry, hitting the apex, and then getting a perfect exit in turn 16. Many drivers ran just slightly wide on their exit, tapping the wall with their rear tyres as they entered the back straight. One driver that did the complete opposite was Charles Leclerc, who lost control of his Ferrari in an oversteer spin and ended up parked across the track, causing a red flag during free practice 1. That Leclerc span out while the other drivers ran wide is reflective of their driving styles and car setup. Charles favours oversteer, meaning that his car is much more responsive in corners, but is a higher risk of losing traction in the back wheels and spinning out. Another notable driver that favours oversteer is Max Verstappen, and it actually is more common for drivers to favour understeer setups. The car has less traction in the front wheels and more likely to overshoot a corner than it is to spin out of control, thus many of the drivers tapping that wall on the exit of turn 16. Oversteer setups are considered more difficult, as understeer is much easier to correct by braking harder. That said, understeer setups can come at the sacrifice of pace compared to a well-managed oversteer setup, as we're seeing with Max Verstappen's dominance. This is one of my favorite aspects of Formula One. The perfect corner is a combination of track position on entry, the condition of the track and tyres, the setup of the car, and the skill of the driver to not only ensure that they get optimal traction through the turn, but they get optimal traction for each individual tyre. The skill involved in managing traction is phenomenal.
Miami hosts its first ever sprint race weekend, and the teams did not hold back, showcasing unique liveries and crucial updates to their cars. What did I think about the special liveries? Well, RB looked like it followed the gradient trend first created by the Instagram app, if you remember that kind of colour scheme. While Ferrari was disappointing, with only trimmings of blue in certain sections of the car. The dream of a blue Ferrari didn't make it to reality, which is kind of disappointing. The weekend kicked off with an interesting free practice one. Early in the session, Charles Leclerc spun his Ferrari and blocked the track, causing a red flag. While F1 cars are technically brilliant, they really suck at slow movements. Turning and 3-point turns, they actually are terrible at them. So with Charles Leclerc being stuck in the middle of the track and unfortunately unable to move, his car was DNF out of the gate. The session was a tough one for drivers across the board, struggling with tyre grip, leading to numerous lockups and battles with oversteer and understeer. Despite these challenges, Max Verstappen managed to clinch P1, followed by Piastri and then Sainz. In the sprint qualifying, Daniel Ricciardo shone brightly, clinching a surprising P4 at the end of the session. Both Mercedes drivers, however, bowed out at SQ2, with George Russell narrowly missing the cut by a mere 0.013 seconds. Nico Hülkenberg continued to impress in his Haas, securing P10, and at the end of the sprint qualifying session, we had Verstappen in P1, Leclerc in P2, and Perez in P3. The sprint race was chock full of battles and penalties. Lando Norris's race ended after turn 1 when an Aston Martin collided with him. A daring move by Lewis Hamilton saw him dive late on the brakes, causing Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll to tangle, then hitting Norris. Stroll returned to the pits to retire, while Alonso changed his front wing. Amidst all the chaos, both Ferraris and Ricciardo's RB challenged Perez and Verstappen at the front. The highlights of this battle were Ricciardo getting P3 for a moment against Perez, and the RB, while struggling for that rear grip, keeping the pace of the Ferrari of Sainz. While that was occurring, another fierce battle raged in the middle of the pack. Hamilton and Magnussen were fighting dirty, like Christina Aguilera dirty. Both drivers pushing one another with great offensive and defensive driving. Often though, Hamilton was out of luck, to the point where Tsunoda was able to overtake Hamilton, only adding more salt to the Mercedes team's wounds. Receiving so many penalties, Magnussen and Haas kept the cars behind him at bay, granting Hülkenberg an easy race to some well-earned points for the Haas team. At the end of the sprint race, Verstappen was at P1, Leclerc P2, and Perez P3. And rounding out the top 8 for points, Ricciardo, Sainz, Piastri, Hülkenberg, and Tsunoda. The cars came back on track to complete qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix. Ricciardo's earliest spark seemed to be non-existent, with a poor qualifying session which landed him in P17. Both Alpines made it into Q2 and did well to move higher within the pack. Tyre struggles were evident as the drivers in Q3 recorded slower times than in the previous runs. Verstappen once again took P1, with Leclerc and Sainz rounding out the top 3. The Grand Prix on Sunday was electric and exciting, to the point where I was staying up in Berlin at 12:30 in the morning watching it. I was so excited about it. The race started with Perez misjudging turn 1, narrowly avoiding a collision with his teammate Leclerc. Oscar Piastri seized his moment, climbing to second by lap 4, and even led the race after Verstappen went into pit. Despite the good weekend, the Red Bull drivers didn't seem to be as in tune with their cars. Grip issues and the car not turning into corners caused Verstappen to make a mistake, hitting a bollard through the chicane. While there was no damage to the car, the bollard had to be removed from the racing line, which brought out the virtual safety car. Soon after, a crash between home race Sargent and Magnussen brought out the full safety car, which played into McLaren's race strategy, particularly benefiting Norris. The race resumed with fierce battles, drawing all eyes on Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri, and Sainz. After a fierce battle with Sainz, Piastri's promising run was marred by a necessary wing change, relegating him to P13. In a stunning turn of events, though, Lando Norris claimed his first Grand Prix victory for McLaren, with Verstappen and Leclerc completing the podium. To all the people who think F1 has become too predictable or boring, Miami 2024 is the punch to the face you really need. What an amazing and exciting race by all. Now, off the track, the F1 world buzzed with big news. Adrian Newey announced his upcoming departure from Red Bull, while Alpine welcomed David Sanchez as their new executive technical director. Nico Hülkenberg signed a new deal with Sauber, confirming an ongoing speculations that Audi in 2026 wanted a German driver at the wheel of their new F1 car. Ferrari unveiled a significant sponsorship deal with HP, which resulted basically in having 15 of their logos added to the car. Perhaps maybe they should kind of reduce them down to maybe save a lot more weight and challenge that impressive McLaren car. Another brilliant weekend, best enjoyed with some cheesecake. Now, Aaron, which team or driver would you like to start with?
I think we should start with Lando. It was a great weekend for him.
It was... Now, people might say that, again, the pit stop helped Lando, and of course it will. That's part of the strategy and making sure you're getting your timings right. But I think Lando, whilst he was not within those top 3 positions throughout the weekend, he looked so in tune with his car and the pace that he was pulling out from it. He was going to be a threat to those Red Bulls, whether that pit stop happened or not.
Yeah, at the end of the day, things like safety cars are things that the teams consider when they are determining their race strategy. They're like, okay, this is going to be our pit window. If a safety car happens at this point in the race, this is what changes to our plan. If a safety car happens at this point in the race, this is what changes in our plan. They consider safety cars in their strategy, and it just all kind of fell into place for Norris. But as you said, the driving was still really, really good.
Yeah, I think he had a fantastic weekend. I've been looking at some of like the technical reviews on those package upgrades that they had brought to the McLaren. So one point there is it was only on Norris's car that all those upgrades were on there. So upcoming Imola, they're going to be both having the upgrades.
Which was actually a really interesting point. I think it was Zach or Andrea came out talking about Oscar only had half the package upgrades. The half that Norris had should have given Norris a 0.2 advantage over Piastri. That being said, Piastri kept within 1/10 of Norris. So Piastri's pace behind Norris was not the full limitations of the package, which means Piastri himself had a great drive.
Oh, I think it was so exciting to see him leading and being so aggressive in that first stint of the race. Like those first 10 or so laps, he was really onto it and just looked phenomenal. I think, it's very proud wearing the papaya orange now. Like it is just super exciting to see what they're cooking up. And, Andrea Stella and the whole team back at McLaren have done a phenomenal job on just adding a little bit more to the car to make it very competitive against those Red Bulls. They should be very, very proud.
And it was unfortunate towards the end of the race with Sainz and Piastri getting a little bit too close to each other. Piastri just losing out with damage to his car and just losing places. Made even kind of worse when, did you hear the radio message that they made to Oscar in the last couple of laps?
No, I did not.
So it was in the last few laps. He was going pretty hard with signs and they just come over the radio and go, Oscar, just a reminder, Lando is leading the race. And it was kind of just a bit of a, don't fuck this up for us.
I think it's more the fact that I don't want to risk getting another safety car in the bunch.
100%.
The pack to bunch up, right? So
yeah.
Also to then Oscar's credit too, like he is that team player. And he then did not use, he did not go with his pride to then attack Sainz again, even further to then cause something like this. So again, it was just a great team effort by McLaren.
He's always been a very good team player in that sense. His battle with Sainz was really good. Sainz was not very happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
I did love that. Tell him to give the position back radio messages, because Sainz is like, I can't talk to him. You need to talk to McLaren and tell them that if he gives me the place back.
Speaking of Sainz, I don't think that Ferrari looked very good at all visually, with the fact that I really wanted a blue car.
I would have loved a blue car.
For the fact that it had so many HP logos. But back to the racing, Sainz and Leclerc, they had a couple of upgrades and they didn't really seem to be performing.
In a weekend where we're talking so much about McLaren, it's really unfortunate for Ferrari. They just didn't bring anything to the race this weekend. The highlight for Ferrari was watching Fred go and celebrate with Lando, like in his blue top.
That was really funny. That whole meme, him above everybody just with the champagne, is just so funny.
Ferrari didn't really have anything. Same with Mercedes. They had an uneventful weekend. They were still doing pretty well. They had some really good battles with other drivers, but there just wasn't anything happening for them. The interesting thing with Mercedes at the moment is mostly just who's going to be their second driver next year.
Yeah, and I think that's where all eyes are on Mercedes at the moment. I think everyone knows that car is not performing. With continual speculation as to who's going to then replace Hamilton, it's always going to be the main talking point for Mercedes every weekend. It's going to be maybe annoying, to be honest. It'll be kind of nice if maybe they mention something in Imola in a week or so time. Like, just lock it in, guys. Give some sort of hope to those Mercedes fans.
There's already been rumors the last couple of weeks in regards to who they're going to get or who they're going to try and get, particularly around Kimi Antonelli in particular. But the interesting thing is it's been apparently Williams that are now leading the drive to get Kimi in their F1 seat as soon as possible, because he's not quite 18 yet. He's not 18 until August.
I keep on forgetting on how young some of these F1 drivers are. It is insane.
On the topic of young F1 drivers, I think Imola, we're getting to see Ollie Beerman again.
Ooh, he's then doing a free practice for Ferrari.
He's doing free practice 1 for Haas, I believe.
Ah.
Because he's still Haas's reserve driver.
Yes. Okay. which then gets very interesting to see with, the news of Nico Hulkenberg leaving Haas for Sauber. Is there an opportunity for Ollie Beerman to maybe be his replacement for Haas next year?
Yeah, and that's something that's being talked about. And obviously, Ollie already has his super license. He's able to jump into an F1 car straight away. He doesn't have all of this sort of extra stuff that they're trying to get around with Kimi. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think he gets 6 free practices throughout the season before they make any decisions around him.
Yeah, well, it will be very interesting. I think I saw a headline about Nico Hulkenberg that was that Komayatsu was like, not begging, but it was like, Nico, what do you want to stay here at Haas? Because whilst Kevin is strategically helping the team out when they're getting the points, it is Nico that has been driving the wheels off that car and securing those points for Haas this year. It must be a very big shock for them to be without a driver, a very good driver for next year's car.
You can't really compete with national pride. That's kind of where Sauber have come in and taken Nico. Is they're like, German manufacturer, German driver, match made in heaven, and they're just running with it. I do think, as you said, Nico's driving really, really well. I was not happy with seeing how Kevin was driving this weekend. I think he went a little bit too far with some of the underhanded techniques that he was kind of using to gain an advantage over the drivers behind him.
I'm swaying. I know no one can go and see me swaying whilst I'm thinking about this, but I'm swaying. I don't mind it. I think it gives us that kind of entertainment value that we do want to see out of F1. It is driving. Yes, he got a myriad of penalties because of that driving, but it was really a fun battle to see him and Hamilton for a number of laps just trying to go at one another. Like I said, it was dirty. It was interesting. It was racing.
The hard racing and the hard defenses and going in really hard, I think, is great. But at the end of the day, I don't want to see a driver gaining an advantage purely because of cheating.
But was it cheating though?
He constantly left track limits and was also driving in a way that does not respect the terms of engagement. Like, the drivers have a set of unwritten rules when they are supposed to be overtaking each other, and he was doing more than he should have as far as like the rules of engagement. He was going outside of them.
Yeah, then I might come back down to penalties enough to stop drivers from doing this. The issue is, like, it's only one person that has been driving like this, and funnily enough, it's been Kevin on both occasions so far this season. Is time penalties enough to then stop this behaviour?
That kind of also brings us to something that's being discussed a little bit off track, is the FIA is meeting with all the teams at the moment to decide whether more points should be awarded further down in the grid. So at the moment, there's discussions about whether points should be given to 12th place or whether points should be given all the way to 20th place. So you might get 1 point for 20th, 2 points for 19th, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the arguments for that is that all of a sudden now the positions between 10 and 20 would matter. Because at the moment, if you come 13th or if you come 17th, doesn't really matter to your team or your team's points. So increasing the points all the way to 20 could avoid this, I'm already out of the points, I'm just going to keep taking penalties kind of mentality that we're seeing from Kevin Magnussen.
I think it does then mean the battle for those smaller, slower teams are going to be even more fiercely competed for, because again, even one jump up means millions of dollars coming back into their bank accounts. I don't know if it solves the whole Kevin Magnussen issue. I think it just comes down to racing, and yeah, I think it just comes back to then the FIA having to then put down bigger penalties for something like that. If you're wanting to say that it's just too much, you're the one driver that's doing it, we're going to give you, 1 week off, for example. We don't want to see it again.
I was talking with Jodie, who's been on the podcast before. She saw just the update of Kevin's incident with Logan, and she goes, oh, Logan didn't give him enough room. And I'm like, no, Kevin was driving in a way that Logan couldn't have, like, it's not an area of the track where you should attempt to overtake. Kevin did, then hit Logan, and Logan span off into the wall. Like, he's now not only cheating to gain an advantage over Lewis Hamilton, but also he ruined Logan's race, and that was really unfortunate for him.
Do you think Kevin was the sole responsible reason for Logan and his race? Or do you think, Logan is done for at that Williams team?
Yes, he's not performing the way that they want him to, but he's had a lot of things working against him. Like, I even was watching a YouTube video this morning that was talking about the fact that he was put into the car last year when he wasn't ready. He should have gotten his first drive in 2024, but Williams was desperate for a driver and they put him in 2023. So it's been a hard slog for him. And yeah, unfortunately, this doesn't make it any better. So it'll be interesting to see whether they do replace Logan with Kimi if they get the opportunity to later in the year.
I think with Williams, they've sacrificed a lot of straight line speed that was really good, that got them points in 2023 to have a bit more of a balanced car with this build for 2024. I just don't know if that car is working at all, for their favour. Alex Albon has not been able to go and do as well as what we expect him to probably be doing, especially in that Williams. We had the crash, which was very unseasoned for Alex to then total the car in Australia, and then Williams having only one chassis. I feel like the whole team is having a very troublesome 2024, and it does not always just fall back on Logan and his shoulders to just be doing the best he can, or else his seat is gone. It is a whole team effort here that is also putting that poor driver up for elimination.
It does feel a little bit scapegoaty for Logan at the moment because, as you said, Alex hasn't scored any points either. The car, it just isn't doing anything for them. It'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward, but I personally would feel bad for Logan if he lost his seat middle of the season.
I agree. Do you think if that was to come true, do you reckon it will be Kimi Antonelli to come on in?
I think they're going to try. They're the ones that have applied to the FIA. So, yeah, I guess we'll see.
Shall we talk a little bit more about the Red Bulls? They actually did a very good job over the weekend. They won the sprint race. They qualified very well. But at the end, Sunday at the end of the race matters, and they were P2.
It was a really interesting thing because it kind of happened to different drivers over the course of the weekend. We had in sprint qualifying, Lando wasn't able to perform because his tires just couldn't find grip on this track. Then in regular qualifying, Daniel Ricciardo had the exact same issue where his soft tires they weren't finding the temperature properly. There was something wrong with the way the tires were interacting with the track, and they were heating up too much on the outside or heating up too much on the inside, and they just couldn't get them into the window and get traction. And then second half of the Grand Prix, that's what happened to Max. The car just didn't feel right. He couldn't get the tires into the right window. He didn't really have the confidence in the traction of the car to actually drive as hard as he normally would. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, he favors that oversteery setup. So if he drives too hard, he will spin out. And so he just didn't because he couldn't.
I think it was quite interesting to see, especially if we just talk about the race, Max having to work, for his position. It was not as simple for Norris to come on in and get P1 at the end of the race. Max blew a tyre or there was a mechanical issue. Max had to fight, and so did that Red Bull. And his strength in the Red Bull just was not there this weekend, and it was tough. But I think, Max having a bit more of that comedy element to it all, going, you know what, we can't always win all races. He was also very happy to see his mate Norris actually win his first. I think it was a very wonderful side of Max that we don't get to go and see because we're just so hard on him for winning all the time.
To watch him in the post-race interviews, and they're like, so what happened with the bollard that you hit in the chicane? And he's like, well, I didn't really like it, so I removed it. And they just deadpan, and they goes, and then no one else had to worry about the bollard being there either.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't think I've ever seen him make a joke. And the memes have you seen the memes of his face, his reaction when he saw that first turn almost incident of Perez locking up, almost taking out both Red Bulls in that first corner?
Yeah, no, I've not actually.
There's just screenshots of Max's wide-eyed face going, oh my God, realizing he was that close to DNFing in the first corner.
I think, again, Red Bull should take this as a really good race. coming in second with Max, they will be on form. They'll be back at their kind of doom castle trying to figure out what occurred, adding some lightning to the car and stuff. You can't win it all, but I think they just did a very good job over the entire weekend, and McLaren just sneaking it through just made it a fantastic race to be watching.
Max did say that. He goes, if a bad weekend is you come second, I'll cop that. There was a lot of talk every time they crossed to the pit wall. They just pretty much focused on Newey. Every shot of the Red Bull pit wall was just Adrian Newey. And then they talk about the fact that he's leaving. The big rumor at the moment is Ferrari.
Yep.
It's going to be announced at any moment that Ferrari have now secured Adrian Newey to start mid-season 2025.
What do you think is going to happen? Do you believe that rumor?
I think there's a good opportunity. The two big rumors at the moment are Ferrari and Williams. And I think both are quite likely as far as what Adrian wants. But he is also being really cagey. He's not even confirming that he is looking for another team or anything like that. But the most recent rumors I've heard are that Ferrari are going to try and announce as soon as possible that they've got Adrian Newey.
It'll be interesting to see what Adrian actually wants to go and do. Like, he is senior enough to be like, you know what, walk away. You've had your time and you've impacted the world of F1 for a number of years, especially from the Red Bull side. But even when he was back at McLaren, his skill set has been well received and it has led to championship points and wins for each one of those teams. So he could just hang up the boot. And to be honest, that's probably where I'm thinking he might go, even if it is just for a break or a year or be on other projects. I'll put my money on that. But again, the rumors surrounding Ferrari and that dream of the pairing of Ferrari, Newey, Hamilton could be mwah. But with everything known, it does not automatically change the car that they're going to then bring out in 2025 or 2026.
And Newey's not going to be there for the creation of the 2025 car. He's going to join.
No, that's already done.
If he joins, he'll be joining in March, April 2025. The season's already underway. So They said that he may have some impact on the car if he does join them. But at the end of the day, his focus is going to be on the new regs for 2026.
It's going to be interesting. Do you think that the news around Newey is another point of destabilization for Red Bull and see maybe that team being undone?
I think potentially, and I think this is possibly a strategy of Ferrari's. Like, we don't know who's leaking these rumors. We know that Ferrari announced Hamilton at a time to destabilize Mercedes. That's the way it came across. And could they also be doing the same to Red Bull? What's their plan of attack going to be for McLaren? That'll be an interesting. How are Ferrari going to destabilize McLaren?
Again, it's all very fascinating to watch, really. Seeing some headlines here or there about a lot of people now wanting to leave Red Bull and CVs going to other teams. And I think Zach Brown came on saying, we've seen a number of Red Bull employees apply for jobs here at McLaren. So any sort of news to kind of take them away from the race seems to be a game that everyone wants to play at the moment.
Christian Horner in particular did not like Zach saying that, and his immediate response was, I get CVs too.
Wait, that Christian's response was, I get CVs too?
Like, as in Red Bull gets CVs every week as well. He did not like the way Zach said that there's a potential mass exodus. One of the teams that kind of faded into the background for me during the race was Aston Martin.
Yeah, what's going on with them?
On the track, they didn't really seem to have much this weekend. Stroll got some penalties. I think Alonso also got penalties this weekend. The big thing to come out of Aston Martin is that Alonso went on to a Spanish news outlet and has kind of accused the stewards of racism against Spaniards, like outright. So it'll be interesting to see how that all goes, particularly when you also then consider that Sainz was really intent that Oscar should have gotten a penalty and the stewards sided in the favor of Piastri. So again, that's kind of the Spanish driver came out second best with the stewards. So I wonder how much that's going to continue to play a part in the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, I think it's a big accusation. I'm not going to give it too much time because, again, I think you'll have to look at all the data over the last, let's say, 30 or so races and then see where that might come from. But I think Aston are kind of using this as potentially a, maybe not scapegoat, but they're just getting very emotional for the fact that their car, their performance so far has been middle of the road. They've not been able to go and add the additional bits to the car to make it more competitive. And you've seen that come through with the likes of McLaren and being worked on that way. Whilst they're keeping, they're still within the top teams, I was expecting a little bit more from both drivers. And, to see Stroll getting into a DNF because of Perez's actions there too, when you only have one car on the scoreboard on the track, it's always going to be so hard to then collect enough points for it to then matter by the end of the season. And it seems to be constant with Aston.
We're starting to see the likes of Haas and RB really push up against competing with Aston, a team that at the start of last year, we were amazed at the fact that they were such a close second to Red Bull, to see the changes happening within that team. And they seem to be falling quite far this year, and that's disappointing for them. A team that is actually going in the opposite direction is Alpine. They had a really good showing. I know that I kind of say that every week, but I kind of say that because every week they're slightly better than how badly they performed the week before.
Well, securing their first championship point, right, this weekend.
Yes.
It must be a sigh of relief for everyone on that team that they must be going in the right direction. Confidence for the drivers that they can go and do this too, because it has been a tough start to the season. And, you and I have also been being very critical of that car. So credit where credit's due. They had a fantastic Miami weekend.
Yeah, this track is one that isn't necessarily famous for a lot of opportunities to overtake and that sort of thing.
I think there was a fair amount of opportunities to overtake. I think we saw a number of those kind of battles occur.
We did this year. It was really interesting to watch. Like, it's not a track known for how many opportunities it delivers to overtake, and yet we did see some really good ones. What I found interesting was that for a track that has 3 DRS zones, we didn't really see the DRS zones resulting in overtakes. A lot of the overtakes did happen in the corners. The DRS helped the cars get close enough to each other to make the attack into the corner, but we didn't see any of those like traditionally DRS overtakes where the move is completed long before the braking zone. We saw lots of moves happening into the braking zone and into the corner, which I found really fascinating with this track this weekend.
It's one of those weird tracks, mind you, too, especially because the track is basically around the stadium. It's one of those weirder United States tracks. I give it credit, though. Again, it was a great weekend of racing across the board. I do think it worked really well with the sprint format. But again, maybe it's the sprint format that I'm favouring maybe a bit more compared to the track. I do not know. But let's keep on talking about some impressive teams from the weekend. Let's talk about RB and Daniel's performance. Woo, 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 woo.
He finally got himself out of that slump that he's been in. He showed that he can perform really, really well. He knows how his car works. I loved seeing Perez giving him that bit of a tow through the first half of the sprint race to help him defend. So it was a great opportunity for him, and he did really, really well.
He did a fantastic job making sure that Sainz was not able to go and pass him. Even with those rear tyres struggling for grip because of how the tyres were connecting with the track, he was phenomenal. Again, so strong. And even Yuki too, he had a really good weekend. When Daniel was not able to go and rise to the occasion, I think for qualifying for the main race, Yuki did very well.
One thing that I appreciate with Daniel not having such a good qualifying was that yes, he had a reason that he didn't perform in qualifying, but at least this reason we also saw impacting other drivers. As I said before, we had Norris and Max both have the same tyre window issues on the soft tyres with this track.
Do you think there is now less pressure and focus now on Daniel because of his Miami?
100%. There's already been news articles talking about the fact that Daniel's position is so much more secure now that he's not quite in the firing line of Liam Lawson taking his seat. I think this has been really, really good for him. If he has another strong weekend at Imola, I think all those ideas will be put to bed because he's back in a car that works for him and he knows how to work it.
Yeah, I think it was really strong. I actually enjoyed, whilst I made the comment about a gradient and Instagram before, it actually looked pretty impressive, the car on TV in terms of the colours. So RB doing a decent job with liveries this year, because I don't mind the original one because it looks like a Red Bull can. So tops to them.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the new livery. I enjoyed how well they did, the fact that they started to look like a top team, whereas we've historically had tops and bottoms on the grid. We haven't really had a midfield anymore. They're starting to really push the boundary of where they sit, and they looked competitive against like the Aston Martins and things like that. And even the Ferraris at some points were struggling against the RBs. So to kind of bring that midfield back into play was really interesting.
Speaking of midfield teams, Sauber, I just shrugged my shoulders. Again, nothing too
I
exciting.
don't even think
from
it's
them
worth
this year.
talking about it.
I think, just them racing and maybe keeping their nose out of getting all dirty and DNFs, they did okay. And I think that's credit to Sauber there. But I think their time is going to come when everything transforms into Audi in 2026. So it's just going to be a little bit of middle of the road for them up until, securing the driver lineup with Nico next year. I don't think there's going to be too much change in that, but it will be very interesting to see what he can then bring to Sauber next year.
The big thing for them is, will Sainz take up their offer to drive for them? Like at the moment, he's holding out. He's doing whatever he likes. He's waiting to see what offers come his way. So they're improving. They're not doing as badly as what we saw at the start of the season, but they're not really doing anything too exciting.
Shall we now talk about our tops and bottoms of the week?
Oh, you're not going to clap?
I don't feel like I should be clapping in this kind of very beautiful apartment that I'm in, at the moment. It'll just wake everybody up. It is 8:40 a.m.
Oh, the hard life of being on holidays.
Oh, hair flick, sun is shining.
Do you want to start with your tops and bottoms, or shall I?
You go.
All right. Well, so my top this week was at the end of the race, watching all of the drivers come together to support Lando. So he pulled up into the main straight, pulled up to his number one bollard, got out of the car, was super excited. The crowd was going wild. And you watched the two other drivers on the podium, Max and Charles, give him a hug. He then had George come up to him because they're good friends. He had Alonso come out into Parc Fermé to give him a hug. He had Sainz come up to him to give him a hug because he obviously was best friends with Sainz back at McLaren.
They
are.
I think the bromance between those two is just palpable.
And Ricciardo as well coming out, and then watching Lando just run at his team and being carried off. Like, it was just really great to see how much the entire grid supported him getting that position and winning his first race. So 100% it brought a tear to my eye watching Norris get his first win.
Did you see him and Andre Stella and that interaction there too? I think there was just so much pent-up energy between the two of them in terms of wanting to deliver the car for Lando to win, and it just looked like that kind of embrace of, we got this, and they're all just so proud.
The same with him and Zach, because Zach's obviously worked with him for 10 years. It's been such a long time coming to see him reach this level of success. I think is really important for that entire team and everyone on the grid. My bottom of the week was, as I said earlier, I'm not a huge fan of the way that Magnussen was racing. Like, good racing is exciting. Watching a driver cop penalties and continue to break the rules to hold up the competition, I just don't find admirable from a driver of his caliber. He is good enough to be able to put up a fight without having to resort to these kind of like cutting corners and things like that.
Okay, my top is going to be, I'm going to give it to the bollard that Max Verstappen hit. I think the memes coming out of that was also quite hilarious. I think that whole notion of the bollard, Max's comment, which he made mention about earlier during those interviews, was just a highlight. And again, it just showcases for me a bit more of that Max comedy. He's human after all. He makes mistakes, but is able to take it and make it turn into something that is kind of fun. And I think everyone has hopefully seen a different side of Max out of it, which is allowing it to then be this kind of top moment for me. So it's kind of the two, the bollard and Max.
It is making us enjoy watching Max Verstappen more again, I think, because his dominance has just become stagnant. So Like to see him working hard, not that he hasn't been working hard, but to see him working hard again and to see him having some fun out on the track, it's really great.
Yeah.
And your bottom?
My bottom is going to be those bloody HP logos on a gorgeous red Ferrari car. It's like giving me 90s faulty printer energy. Like it is just, I'm not here for it. I know that they have signed so much money over to Ferrari and props to them for securing it, but I just don't like it.
We should have had an entirely blue car. Like it's just one weekend to just no red, just entirely blue car. And you wouldn't have noticed the HP logos quite so much. When we saw their outfits, I'm like, oh my fucking God, we're going to get a bright blue car. And then we just got stripes.
And I think this also comes back to, like, you know, we got so pumped up by a number of different news publishers creating what the car could go and look like in terms of this gorgeous blue, whether it was supposed to be like a navy or more of that kind of baby blue kind of color. Like there was just so much, I think, energy and excitement for it to look blue and full blue. And then, yeah, we just got some stripes here or there as part of the livery. Again, those HP logos, they will be at Imola, right? So they will just be on the red car without the blue, I assume. Well, I'm not one to toot my own Vertugeflugen, but I think this has been a very amazing episode. But it's now time to say goodbye to Miami. Mwah, loved you. What a great race.
Yes. So next week we head on over to our very first European race of the year in Imola, Italy. This is going to be a pretty special race for Let's Talk because
I'm going to be there. Yep. To say I'm excited is an understatement. But yes, I'll be leaving Eurovision to head to Italy with my good friend Bryce to watch the race live. And then Bryce will join us for our episode afterwards. It is going to be amazing. So cool. I've got my papaya shirt for McLaren. I've got my Ferrari red to wear for those 2 days. I am just buzzing.
I can personally guarantee that listening to me try and control the two of you is going to be well worth it. So everyone should make sure that they are subscribed to hear the feat that will be me editing out you two to make us sound semi-professional. Last time I let you two watch a Formula One race together, Bryce ran sideways into a shipping container.
I would say blame the excitement and alcohol for that and the fact that Bryce is pretty unco. You know, love him, but yeah, he doesn't really walk straight. He just walks into shipping containers. So that's on him, not me. I think it's going to be very exciting. I think it's going to be amazing to be at a European race. I'm so excited on how they're going to organize it and how we're even going to get in and out. The weekend will come and it's going to be amazing. So until then, head on over to our social media channels at Let's Talk Show and, you know, spend 2 weeks being Lando Stands with us. Thanks for tuning in this week and we'll catch you next time on Let's Talk.
Let's Talk is hosted, produced and edited by Sean Polidano and Aaron Best. Our show is an entertainment podcast. The views expressed by our hosts and guests are for entertainment purposes only. Let's Talk is recorded in Paran in Melbourne, and we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and the Bunurong people of the East Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.